what a young man wants to aspire to, like, will not make sense in some cases to young women. I mean, they'll be like, that's dumb. But for a young man, it's like, that sounds awesome, you know. And it will be the same exactly in reverse.
Hi, everyone. It's Zahra Sethna, host of the Collapse Life podcast. Thanks for joining us for another episode. And please remember to hit the like and subscribe buttons before we get started. One of the things we talk about and think about a lot here at Collapse Life is how the old rules by which people used to make life plans have been thrown out the window recently. We used to tell young people there was a formula for success: get a job, pay your bills, save for retirement, Social Security and Medicare will be there for you as you age. Of course, none of that feels real anymore, if it ever really was. So, what's the alternative? Today, we're joined by Matt Smith and his son Maxim to talk about The Preparation, a book they co wrote with legendary investor and adventurer Doug Casey. On the surface, it's a guide for young men looking for a different option to either college or a dead end job. But if you're collapse aware, this book is actually a blueprint for all of us because the world we're heading into will demand competence, adaptability, and the ability to think for ourselves. Welcome, Matt and Maxim. It's so nice to have you back on the podcast.
Thank you very much for having us.
Yeah, thank you. Great to be back.
It's lovely to see you both. And congratulations on this book. Not only is it always an accomplishment to put a book out, but this has been quite an endeavor. And we've been talking about it since your last appearances here, Matt. That was, if you can believe it, back in January of 2024. And Maxim, you were on to talk about your experiences in November of 2024. So there has been a lot of work put into this. So congrats.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, he did really the hard work because he was our guinea pig, our beta tester for it to kind of figure it all out. But yeah, it's a lot of work. Doug's written many books, but this is the first one that I've done, and yeah, it was a lot of work, but we're quite proud of it. We think it really, and the reviews we've gotten have been amazing, frankly. So I'm almost shocked, actually, that we've gotten such favorable reviews. You don't know. You're putting something out there, you have no idea. I mean, and primarily the goal with this book for me as a dad was just trying to solve a very specific problem, and that was his problem. And then, then with making it in book form so it could be useful to everybody, that's the idea. But yeah, so we're very happy with it. We didn't know, we had no idea what to expect, but it's been great.
Yeah. And it's quite the book because it's not just a story told from beginning to middle to end, but it's this framework that you've put together to help other people go on a journey to learn skills and to develop their character so that they can be ready for the world in a way that college or work or, as you said, experience in the military would not give them. And, putting it together, you're not just doing it for Maxim. By putting it out in the world publicly, you're basically taking this framework that could work for one person and suggesting it could work for many people. So, yeah, so really well done in a short amount of time. And that's kind of where I wanted to pick up. I mean, you've told the story of how the book came about many times before, including on this podcast. And so I would encourage people to go back and watch those interviews. And I kind of wanted to pick up at this idea that the premise of the book is basically the question, what would a young man need to do to become competent and educated and valuable and fulfilled and, in your words, dangerous? So this really is a book about young men, but as a starting framework, it could be used by anyone who kind of wants to break free of the system or change the way they have been living up until this point. And I know that that's some of the feedback that you've been getting as you've been talking to other readers about the book. So Matt, can you talk a little bit about what someone who's 50 or 60 or 70 could take from the book?
Well, I think people at whatever stage in life they're at, it turns out, they can find their own value out of it because I'll just say we got an email from a guy who's 71, who's like, I'm starting tomorrow.
Yeah.
So, I mean, these things surprise. I was not expecting this at all. I had only thought about it in terms of, could you do this younger? Thinking if we'd had this thought through, then Max, a lot of these things he could have done sooner. And so we actually, wasted time in a way by waiting until he was 18.
Mhm.
But the feedback that I've gotten from, because to be honest, the vast majority of people that have bought it and given feedback so far are parents, not
Right.
kids, you know? So a lot of the feedback that we've gotten from them is, oh, this works for me. There's many ways I can use this. And I think
Mhm.
it is because we do try and give people the mental framework for how they should be trying to live their life. I mean, meaning, you know, and I don't know if we've talked about the be, do, have stuff before, but you know, that's super important. And most people never even consider the question of be, really, which is the one that really matters. And this book focuses in on that intently, you know, and tries to plant that seed. And then it gives you very, very specific directions about exactly what to do. Now, I don't know if it would all, if you're, you know, someone in a midlife or that 71-year-old, I don't know if he was going to look at this and go, I want to do all 4 years of this program exactly as you have it laid out. But certainly I think it changes the way people think about what they might do at any age.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that since Maxim was last on, there's been kind of a different structure that you put around the experiences. I think, Maxim, when we met before, you had just finished doing some wildfire
Mhm.
experience, and you were an EMT, and I think you were working on scuba and Spanish and chess and things like that. But since then, in the sort of year or so that's passed, you've put a different kind of structure around how to approach these different experiences. And I suppose that's part of the beta testing process that you learn as you
Exactly.
go.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about how the book is structured and what people will encounter when they open it.
Sure. So I'd say end of last year, we came up with the idea of the cycles. And we were loosely going off of that general idea the entire time of having one main anchor course. This is the main focus. But with the idea of the cycles, it adds so much more structure to it. So you not only have the anchor course, which is the main focus, but you also have academics, reading, reflections, and then
The activities,
the
yeah.
activities as well. And so now there's highly structured 3-month segments, 3-month cycles where you follow along with those exact things that we lay out in the book. And that's more so what I've been doing during this year, especially with the pilot cycle and the sailing cycle. Is I still didn't have all the academics in the beginning of this year, but I was starting to add in the general idea as the idea of cycles were better structured before the book was released.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like in the weeds stuff, but truthfully for us, it was a big breakthrough when we came up with how exactly do we think about the structure of each of these things.
Mhm.
And when as soon as we did, it made it a lot easier for us to fill in all the details. And so Max was like going with for a long time, just kind of the I don't know, I guess some core principles, but not really the structure at all, frankly.
Right. It was just like, what's the next big thing I could do, big course or program I could do, instead of having a very structured step by step process.
Yeah. And so the structure now, these cycles are sort of a 3-month blocks that you'd be able to do 4 blocks in a year. So it sort of mirrors the same type of focus that people would have if they were in college, that they would go through semesters or quarters and they would be focused on those courses that they were doing at that time. And then they would move on to a different focus once that quarter was done. Um,
But there's
which
a big
Yeah.
difference.
Okay,
In
go ahead. Yeah.
college, in college, you take 12 credit hours, and that's considered full time, right? It's a joke. And I mean, I dropped out of college after only 3 semesters, but I remember the difference for me. You know, all through my public school education, I'm there all day long. You know, I'm there for 8 or 9 hours a day every day, and then I had to go. You know, I went into the army to be able to pay for my college, and I'm like, you were doing stuff all the time, and then
24
you start
hours,
in
yeah.
college and you realize no one's doing anything. Like it's actually amazing how much time is squandered. It's 80% is like hanging out. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but this is basically there's the each cycle has the basic idea in it that the person is focusing 40 productive hours a week into developing themselves. So there's a lot to do, but it's not more than any if you got a job that anyone's going to expect of you once you would graduate anyway. So I think college leaves people pretty unprepared with this looseness and schedule and lack of like. I think this is why millennials came up with the term adulting. You know.
And they seem to rail against it.
Yeah.
So adulting is just kind of doing all the things that you need to do to get through life, but it's like, oh, why do I have to do this? So in a way, what you said is true. It's 40 hours a week or more, which is what you'd be giving into a job anyway. But at least this way, you're spending those hours on yourself, on things that you're either interested in or for some reason motivated to complete. So that's a very different orientation to what motivates you to get out of bed in the morning, I guess. I think what's really interesting, that you started this, Matt, as a way to provide some support for your son, but what you've ended up doing, perhaps inadvertently, is almost laying down a framework for a parallel system to higher education, and that's kind of where Collapse Life wakes up and leans in and goes, "Wow, this is really interesting," because as systems break down or become um, useless for us, or even perhaps the opposite of a benefit to us, we think about, okay, well, what is the parallel system that can be created to provide whatever that need is? And so, have you been seeing it that way as well?
Yeah, I guess well, certainly you can look at the educational system as fundamentally broken. I mean, so certainly it is a parallel to that we think does a lot more than could possibly be done through college. But I think the college system is so broken that it's so dangerous. I know a guy who told me I don't know, maybe it was like 6 or 8 months ago when I told him we were working on this book. He said, I lost my daughters to university.
Wow.
Like sent them away and then they will have nothing to do with him now. So it's like, I mean, it's crazy, isn't it? Like his son is still like, they still have a good relationship, but he said they went to the best schools and he said, I lost my daughters to university. And that is like a terrifying thought that could happen. Forget about the fact that most kids end up, with tons of debt that they can never discharge, that is a burden for them forever. And yeah, it's a disaster. And then you get to the fundamental question: does it actually prepare them for, to live life well? Does it actually do that? And I don't think it's really ever done that well. It's prepared people for a job, for credentials necessary for a job.
Right.
So, and I think, or I'll just say, the biggest thing about the focus of this book, it's very experiential, lots of doing. So you get lots of experience under your belt and you feel and you develop lots of capabilities. So it changes you as a person, all that doing. But the orientation of the book is around being, and it's trying to answer the fundamental question: what kind of man do you want to be? And that is never asked of young men. You wonder why you find so many young people feeling, men especially, women have their own issues, but I was focusing on just young men here, feeling lost or aimless. It's because they aren't focusing on anything that really matters to them fundamentally, which is being matters. It really does. I mean, that's like where you develop your line in the sand, where you differentiate yourself from the hordes or the lemmings or whatever are out there.
So, Maxim, on that note about formulating an idea of the kind of man that you want to be and then working towards that, what does the book present in terms of how to build that?
Well, I think it's the combination of the focus of being and doing. The concept that's presented in the book, first off, gets people thinking in that direction, but it's the personal code that kind of starts it off, that points them in the right direction towards virtues, which we outline some of the Greek and Roman virtues that we ask people to pick a few of those out for themselves to focus on. But the personal code is where you start off with a B of like, what am I going to allow myself to do? And if you combine that with just thinking about the person you'd want to be, I think especially for a young man, it's much easier to come up with an idea of the type of man you want to be. If you go, well, how does this man act? What is this man capable of? What does he look like? How does he talk? And you can outline all of that within the personal code of like, here's what I'll allow myself to do. Here's what I won't allow myself to do. And we separate it into public and private conduct to get down to the details of it all.
Yeah, I think for a young person, well, not just a young person, for everybody, there are things that we do that when we do them make us feel small or ashamed. It's like a little white lie, like not a real deceptive lie, like not like an evil intent lie, but even like a white lie, where you say a friend asks if you want to have dinner on Friday and you don't feel like it, so you say, "Oh, I can't, I'm busy," rather than just telling them. I mean, it makes you feel small when you do that. Actually, it makes you feel a little dirty by doing that white lie instead of saying honestly, it's like, "I'm not really up for it this Friday. Maybe we could do it another time."
Right.
But so it's essentially part of the personal code is asks the person to reflect on like, what are the things that you do when you do them make you feel small? Like, stop doing those things. And so essentially that you develop a set of rules that he was referring to about like, and they're only for you. The rules for you don't judge others by them. You just judge yourself by them because you are already judging yourself by them. Because they make you feel small when you do them. So, but the key to it is that is actually where self-esteem comes from. Because it's actually where self comes from, because otherwise you're just going with the flow. The easiest thing is a little white lie to get out of doing something I don't want to do. That's just going with the flow. But if I'm deciding, I don't like to lie, like I don't feel good when I lie, so I'm just not going to do that anymore. And even if that means something uncomfortable, like I'll try and I don't want to hurt people's feelings, but I'm going to be honest about it instead of a lie.
Yeah.
And that is like a beachhead where a person begins to form themselves, and if you don't have those rules around your own conduct, then I think that you end up doing what we've seen a lot of in recent years.
Yeah, just giving in and going with the flow and doing what you're told, and not actually drawing a line in the sand of this is what I will not do. I will not cross this line for whatever reason. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it occurs to me that in many ways, society used to do a lot of this. We had a picture of what we expected of young people and the kinds of adults that we wanted them to grow into. And maybe as a society, we would hold them accountable for behaviors in a way that we don't do now. And a lot of that has eroded through this idea of freedom and choice and equity and all these good sounding expressions, but that have allowed maybe so much choice and so little expectation that we've now arrived at this point where we don't really tell people what we need them to do as they grow into adulthood. I mean, there have been rites of passage for young men in cultures for forever. And you mentioned the Romans and the Greeks, and certainly even more modern examples in cultures. There are certain rituals or experiences that young men go through where you go from becoming a boy to becoming a man. And we don't have that anymore. What do you think we've lost in Western society that doesn't provide that off ramp or on ramp for young people anymore?
Should I go first?
Well, I guess if we're using the example of Rome, like you were saying, the rite of passage being trading in the toga praetexta for the toga virilis, I think the only way you could do that was by pursuing the virtues. That was the only thing. I mean, virtue comes from the root vir, which means man. So to pursue virtue is manly. And that was if they were displaying virtue, they would be given the toga virilis as a symbol of their manliness
Mhm.
and their transition into adulthood. So I think it all comes down to the loss of focus on virtue. It's it's nothing else but that.
I agree 100%. Yeah. I mean, so there are virtues that people talk about like freedom. That's a that's I wouldn't say that's it's actually, yeah, it's not a it's a wouldn't it's not really a virtue, but it sounds good, and freedom sounds good,
Sure.
right? So we basically replace these token ideas that allow for conduct to be okay without holding a standard of what is like incredible,
Mhm.
like something that inspires you to pursue, like some worthy and noble pursuit. And yeah, I think that as young men especially are like aching for a worthwhile pursuit.
Mhm.
And I think if you just show them away, and I don't think that yeah, everybody says that they're just sitting there looking at their phones and they don't want to, they're disengaged with the world. It's like, what do you expect them to do? They literally are the most policed, surveilled, scheduled population that has ever existed on the face of the earth. Scrolling through their phone is one of the approved activities that they can do and not be hassled. And so that's what they end up doing. So anyway, worthy pursuits, and certainly virtues provide that.
Yeah. And I think not only as you explained, we have this highly surveilled society at the moment, but we also have a basically a crumbling society. When we're living at the end of an empire, so we don't really um, offer a very uh, beautiful world for young people to be entering into. For example, with other rites of passage. We would send these people off to have these experiences, whether it was warrior training or learning the arts to be polished to enter into society or things like that. And that was to come back and enter into a stable society. And instead we are unleashing young people into basically a system that's falling apart. And so it seems like the preparation kind of turns that on its head. It's not about fitting into a system. It's about building resilience and skills to be able to be anti-fragile, to use Nassim Taleb's concept, in a system that's collapsing. Really, is that correct?
Yeah, I think so. But I think the state of the world should basically be irrelevant in the formation of an individual. It shouldn't matter. And instead, we have sort of outsourced all of our thinking and all of our work around these things to the system. The
Mhm.
system, just if we just got on the conveyor belt, then the idea that the system delivered for us, that's becoming obvious that it doesn't do that. I think to more and more people every day, but that was always a bad idea. I mean, yeah, it was always a bad idea
Yeah.
to take that route. So I think, people have certainly lived in worse times than we're living in now in the past.
Mhm.
And there are remarkable people that emerged in that and were successful and still lived a good life. And I don't think I think that's exactly the same approach one should have now. It's taking a lot of responsibility for your future.
Mhm. No,
Yeah, I
I
think
think
that
you're absolutely right. It's maybe just the collapsing system just makes it all the more obvious that there has to be another path.
Exactly.
yeah, I mean, well, Louis L'Amour is a good example of this actually because he he did lots of amazing things at a very young age, and he even has a quote where he says, "I hardly noticed the Great Depression.
Hmm.
I hardly noticed it because things were already rough at the time, but it was like, oh, that's just how it is. I'm going to keep going down this path." So I think that's a
Right.
good example of it all.
Yeah, we might be coming into something like that, but this is not hard yet, people. It's going to get worse. So
Um, I think Maxim is probably in a very unique situation in that he has you for a dad, Matt, and is someone like Doug Casey with all of his experience and wisdom in your orbit, in your family orbit. So you, Maxim, probably see the world through very different eyes than many of your peers, certainly in America or Canada or Western Europe, in the sense that you've had the front row seat to how the economy works or doesn't work for us, or all of these things. So I think that you being the beta tester for this is really interesting, because you come to it from a different place, but you can also maybe help people understand um, some of the things that you've already internalized at a young age.
That's probably true. I think if I'm measuring things against my peers, they're still oriented on the typical paths, just assuming that the future's gonna turn out all right for them no matter what on those paths. So I think that's true. It's good to have my dad and Doug's opinions because, well, I think they're seeing the world as it is, or at least as it could be, and even though a lot of it is doom and gloom, it's very helpful because it could be that way. And it looks like it will be that way, so you can orient yourself um, to do the things necessary to sustain yourself in that time as well. But even in peaceful times,
But honestly, if I could roll back the clock, every person I know, Doug, of course, says this himself, but most of the adults who have read this book and want it for their kids say, I just wish I had this when I was 18. And of course, when they were 18, it wasn't the same scenario.
Yeah.
So to me, it's yes, the world is kind of going off kilter. It's a problem, but it's irrelevant really to what can you do, as an individual. And I think that it's just, you can't, it was always a mistake to fully rely on systems, for your life to be spoon fed,
mhm.
life. I mean, it was always a mistake. So,
Yeah.
I think the only big difference is that it's a motivating factor. It's an additional motivating factor to go, here are these problems ahead. And so if I do this, it'll be even more important.
yeah,
At least what I can do, what my capabilities are, is going to be even more important. Still important nonetheless.
makes sense.
Yeah. Matt, you've mentioned that a lot of the people who have the book in their hands now definitely want to make sure that their kids read it and incorporate some of this. What do you think, as a parent, that other parents need to do to prepare themselves for the preparation? Because there must be something from the family side, from the community side, that will be needed in order to support young people going through this kind of program.
Oh, I think that's a good question. What do they need to do to prepare themselves? I mean, I really think they should read the book because they will understand the framework that their children really need in order to be, adaptive to the environment that's already here, and to make sure to certainly to save themselves from the major downsides that can come with debt, and with all college students end up with, of some degree or another. But other than that, I mean, I really think adults, if you think that, like, if you're worried about your kids, I think you should read the book first before you ask them to read it.
Mhm.
And I think that once you do, you'll know it. You'll either totally agree or not. But if you're in agreement with them, then you'll begin to formulate. Well, actually, let me say one other thing. Our family has basically, I look at most problems that we experience as they're family problems to solve. So, like, I looked at Max's, just situation, who's coming in at adulthood, and he's got to do something. What are you going to do? I looked at it as a family problem,
Mhm.
and so that's the way we approached it. And honestly, with the book itself, I did do a post about this, as I called it, a family affair. I mean, you'd be like, without my wife working on this, and everyone, of course, thanks their wife for everything. I know, but it's true. Like, she literally pulled this literally out of the fire that I threw it into, when I was at my wit's end with it. I really did. And and then obviously without Max doing the beta tester part, writing obviously his contributions to the book directly, and then my daughter super involved, and she's like kind of our publicist, I guess, at this point. It's been a good experience for her. So yeah, no, it's but I think that all these things would, you can't, atomize a family. You can't
Right.
allow that to happen. I think you have to look at the families. The difficulties we're facing are way harder to deal with alone.
Right.
Now, why you would then force your children to deal with it alone, to me, is insane. I
Right.
mean, there's, so I think looking at things as a family problem and working on and like framing it with your family, your children, as these are things that we can work on together. Like, I don't expect you to fend for yourself at 18, which is, kind of the way the extras like me grew up.
Mhm.
It worked out fine, but it's also why I see it. I think it's bizarre. What a way to deal with things. So I think think of things as a family affair, a family problem, and
Yeah.
it brings family closer together in that process.
And a shared journey. So while, say, Maxim is out doing these experiences, you're kind of going along vicariously with him. Are there actually any activities within the scope of the framework that can be done jointly, or is it very much meant
Well,
to be the young
there
person themselves?
definitely there are a lot of things that you could do together, and some people. I mean, I was talking to Tom Dyson the other day, and he's like, his son is 17. He's like, yeah, I asked Dusty if he's okay if we go and do this with him. It's like it's a fine line
Mhm.
because there's something about as soon as when the parent is in the room, it suffocates the child. And if you want the child to not be a child anymore, but to be a man, then you've got to create a vacuum where
Yeah.
they can, really figure it out on their own. So I do think there are places where you definitely could, but I think fundamentally the hero's journey that ends up being a reality out of this, that young person's got to go through.
Yeah, for sure. There's a piece of the experience that ties into this shared journey in the sense that I felt a little bit and still do feel a little bit like I've been sharing with Maxim's journey because of the Substack that you write and you share every week. This is what I've done this week, and as much as it in the beginning might have felt a little bit like just making a list of things that you did, there was something really genuinely nice and really interesting about reading those posts and just knowing that you were growing and that you were doing the things that you'd promised to do, and that you were learning from them or that you were struggling with them. So talk a little bit about the part that accountability plays in all of this.
Yeah, I mean, 18 weeks into the program, which I think over 110 weeks now, my dad said to me, "You know what? I think you should start a Substack and just start writing about what you're doing each week to hold yourself accountable. And over time, you'll gain more and more followers, people following along. And with that weight of expectations from other people, it'll help push you forward a little bit."
Mhm.
So every week since then, I've been doing that.
And some weeks it really made you feel sick to do.
Yeah, some weeks I was like, man, I did not do nearly as much as I could have this week. And now everybody has to know about it because I wasn't going to not publish anything.
Mhm.
So maybe out of 110 weeks, there are 5 weeks like that, maybe seven. But that's a key part of each cycle is the reflection and accountability. Um, and we ask people to dedicate about 5 hours each week to doing that, to writing what they're doing, because not only is it helpful for accountability and people looking at what you're doing and cheering you on or offering you suggestions for what you could do, offering you opportunities, which is a huge part of it. Um, but you also get to explain what you're learning. And I know
Mhm.
for me, I can fly through an online course or something that we offer and hardly remember anything except a few facts. Whereas when you're trying to basically write a weekly letter to someone, you are forced to outline what you actually learned from it. So it's helping you learn at the same time as
Yeah.
holding you accountable.
Yeah, and putting it in a frame that will make sense to somebody else, makes sure that you've understood it. Because if, as you're writing that down, you can't explain it, then you have to go back and make sure that you understood it yourself. So,
Right.
yeah, I think that that's one of these lessons that's packed into this book that could be applicable to all of us. I'm, just recording what we've done in a week and what more we could have done, or what we promised ourselves at the beginning of the week that we didn't do. Um, is really important. And I feel, Matt, you might feel the same way, that as we get older, think times just flies by and things are just a blur, and it's hard to remember the experiences that we've had, even if they were great or meaningful experiences at the time. You get 5 weeks out from it and you've basically forgotten it. So having a record of it, whether it's public or not, is a pretty interesting way to approach the times that we're in.
I think it's really important. Yeah, I think because it also, we're all in routine, and even if we're actually making a lot of progress, if they're not external signals telling us you're making progress, then a lot of times you could feel unreasonably dissatisfied with the way things are going, like really not reasonably. I mean, like you're really being irrational about it. But by simply documenting your progress, like, well, just in little ways, like I've always loved the concept of what I did this week, and I think it's one I've tried to use a lot, and I use it in my annual review of my own stuff, like what were the major things that got done, and it really helps you understand, like, no, these things are moving forward, and you're comparing it with the past. You go, no, this is good. I can see patterns, what's working, what's not working, and I can improve.
Mhm. It strikes me as just a little bit ironic that you've put together this very hefty book, which is very structured and has what might be described as rules within it. And yet you and Doug are famously anarchists. So, talk a little bit about how those two kind of sit side by side.
Well, the biggest thing is, like, I don't like rules. Anarchist really means that you're not ruled by another, but it doesn't mean at all that you don't have rules. I have lots of rules, but they're for me, and only me. I don't put them on other people either. Um, and I think that it's the rules are basically there, again, going back to that personal code thing. It's because if you can't define who you are, then you will be defined by your surroundings and what everyone else does. And I think so, without your own personal set of rules, without that, I think it all falls apart. And then the other thing is that there's a high structure to the book, because the truth is that with people have no idea what's possible. And so if we just threw out these things, you could do this, or you could do that, or you could do, I don't think it would be nearly as effective as saying, no, literally, here's 3 months. This is exactly what you should do.
Mhm.
And especially at first, when you're first starting off, I mean, when people decide to go to college, they haven't really decided what to do. They just decided to, move into a certain status in life, but they aren't actually, they're still operating without a plan, without any structure. So, and it's really hard for a young person to come up with that on their own, I think. I think it's hard for all of us to come up with it on our own. And it was painful for us to come up with it for the book, to be honest. But I think it provides a lot of utility.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Because, you can be paralyzed by having endless options. Where,
Mhm.
it's a privilege to have the choice of being able to do anything you want. But when you're 18 years old and anything you want could be literally anything in the world, with a few restricting factors, it can be paralyzing. And so having a little bit of structure in there, that gets you started, at least, is great. It's kind of like if you go to college and you look at the course catalog and you
Exactly.
don't have an infinity amount of options. You have hundreds and hundreds of options to choose from, but there are also certain prerequisites that have to be put in place. You have to do this before you can do this. And so your book, again, kind of mirrors some of that. Um, I wanted to ask a little bit about prerequisites, just thinking in the same frame as a college student might. Um, are there any certain factors that you think need to be in place for a young person before starting on this? And then you mentioned, you could have, if you had had this idea formulated a little bit better earlier, that Maxim could have started this earlier. So what are some of the things that that need to be in place for a young person to be able to start on this journey in terms of maturity, in terms of emotional regulation, in terms of finances, all of the things that would need to be in place for this to be successful?
I mean, I don't think there really are any, honestly, but I do think that, we talk about the issue, the number, immediately what I expected people to always say was finance was the problem. But money was the problem. And so there's a chapter in the book about how to finance a program. And one of in the biggest part about it where people make the biggest mistake, honestly, is that they don't understand the idea of how critical it is that when you turn 18, you do not begin to take on liabilities. At that point, when you're coming out, you're leaving your parents' house or whatever, you have no lease obligation, you've got no car payments, you've got you've got no credit card debt. Basically, so you're free and flexible. And I think there's this desire, or this, because we live in this consumer culture we live in, there's this thought that immediately now that you're 18, you ought to have these things, these. And as soon as you sign a lease, your life is dramatically limited in what you can do. It's limited based on geography and how you spend your time. It has to at least generate enough capital for you to have a place to sleep. Like Max slept, he stayed in family and friends, a few nights in the car in a Walmart parking lot. I mean, he's like, avoiding the liabilities is super important to it. And also there are jobs that you take along the way that can finance the program. I mean, during one of his cycles when he was doing the EMT, how much you worked at Office Depot, and how much did you save in like?
Well, I worked at Office Depot and as a pizza delivery driver, and I saved $5,000 in like 2.5 months or something like that. And that was more than enough to fund EMT school, which is one of the cheapest things to do. So even with nothing in the beginning, you can start right away.
Yeah, I mean, it's just your attitude about it, I guess, and in a mental framework about it, and avoiding the liabilities is the key. I mean, I'd saved what is truly I'll say an irresponsibly small amount of money for him in a Vanguard account. And I mean, I didn't do the, whatever the annual tax limits were that I didn't do that. So he had enough for basically 1 year of college, 1 year. Which is, like I said, it's irresponsible of me to only put that aside. So he got that. But I would say today you've got, how much money do you have compared to that, above or below that amount? I mean, you don't have to say dollar amount, but are you 10% or have you spent 20% of it? Are you equal to where you were?
Say just above that original amount. I don't know if I could give a percentage exactly.
Okay, so 2 years into it, he has more money than he did when he started.
Right. Yeah.
So
Amazing.
my money didn't make a difference.
And maybe make a quick short list of all the things that you have done in that time period, just to help people understand.
Oh boy, I forget a lot. Well, I did EMT school. I worked on the ranch here and learned how to raise and treat cattle, fix fences, drive tractors. Then worked on wildfires for about 41 days last year. Sailed in and around the Falkland Islands through the Strait of Magellan. Flight school as well. Worked on a geophysics crew for a short amount of time. And a lot of little things in between all that, and studying as well.
Right.
So, but more than I can remember, I forget about half of it every time I list it.
Even that short list in a small amount of time with the small amount of money that you just mentioned, and you haven't bottomed that account out. You actually have more than you had when you started. I mean, that's a pretty impressive resume right there. Just going back to that earlier question that your dad has already answered, but I wanted to get your perspective on it in terms of kind of ready to start. And you're going to be different than many other 20-year-olds out there, but now that you've done 2 years of this and you've been learning along the way and changing the way you approach this, what do you think made you ready to do what you did and to succeed? Or is there anything that you wish you would have known when you started, or you wish you could have done?
I don't know if I'm sure there's lots of things I wish I would have known when I started, but I don't think there's necessarily anything I needed to start besides a little bit of ambition to do something. Because
Mhm.
I knew I didn't want to go to college, so that narrowed down the list of possibilities.
Right.
Um, but besides that, I was the typical 17, 18-year-old. So that means basically someone with not a great character, someone who's very anxious, someone who doesn't know anything. Everything you could list about a 17-year-old boy. I was all of those things, and still I was able to do it. So there weren't any prerequisites to starting off. I don't know if that answers your question.
It does. That answers it perfectly, and I think that that's great to hear. It's you thought of yourself as pretty much the average kid. There's nothing particularly that denoted you as being special to be able to succeed, and I think that's really important, because I think if the goal of writing this book and getting it out in the world is that more young people follow a path like this, you want to make sure that that everyone feels as though they can see themselves in it. And I think one of the important things maybe for you to share is, how did you motivate yourself to stick with it once you had committed to doing it? There must have been moments where you just felt like walking away and giving up. How did you carry on?
Well, all the moments where I felt like actually not doing it were probably within the first 5 to 7 months of it. Um, but that's just because I would say it's because I still didn't have enough accomplishments under my belt
Mhm.
to make it seem worthwhile. Because all I had done within that time span was going through EMT school, officially becoming an EMT after taking the national exam, and then working here on the ranch. And that wasn't quite enough yet to justify it in my mind,
Mhm.
which seems silly looking back on it. But I think it's just about trying to build as much momentum as possible, as fast as possible. The more accomplishments you have, even for me, in the beginning, it was things like reading. How many books can I read within a certain amount of time? Which sounds a little silly because it's just reading, but it is actually beneficial, especially over time. But stacking those accomplishments as fast as possible, which is much easier with the cycles. I mean,
Yeah,
it has
it's
the
more intense.
academics, it has the reading, the reflection, and the anchor course.
Mhm.
So that was the motivating stuff, especially later on, because it builds on top of each other, compounds. Was just here's something else I've done, here's another thing I've done, and that's motivating in of itself.
One of the challenges is to the world. Uh, if you tell someone you're going to college, it's a good college, especially, like, they'll go, "Oh yeah, you got your kids on the right track. Everything's going right." To your peers, it looks like you're winning, right? You're doing the right thing.
Mhm.
Um, with when you go your own way, there's none of those social cues,
Right.
and so uh, you have to mentally prepare yourself for that. And I did try with Max to to tell him this was going to be an issue, because as an entrepreneur, that's the way how it is. Like,
Right.
whatever you do looks stupid to everybody until it's obvious that it works. That's
Yeah.
just how it is. And so my most of my life has been that way, and so I'm comfortable with it. But it is hard to go against the tide in that way, and that's why I do think that having the structure makes it easier. Having it documented makes it easier. And as you build this, especially I went out for you by publishing on Substack, you have people like that you don't know coming in and encouraging you, you know,
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
so it does make a difference. And I think as more people do it, then we're looking at ways we can get, to essentially have get these young people together, like to connect them so that basically there can be more positive social cues essentially around going against the grain.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a major issue, and it's really hard to do. But honestly, I don't know anybody who is really successful who did anything where they had to rely on social cues of whether or not you're on the right road to get there. Like, it's always good doing something unconventional, that looks like a failure at first.
And it's not unusual as well to question or want to back out of doing anything new in the first, say, 5 to 6 months of doing something. I'm sure there are millions of college students who think that first semester, this is horrible and I don't want to do it, or I want to transfer schools, or I want to do something else. This is a normal emotion. And so I guess the takeaway is to just sort of almost anticipate that it's going to happen and just push through it, because on the other side, you will have accomplishments. I mean, within that first period of time, you qualified as an EMT, whereas in the first 6 months of college, you've done some courses. So already, you're setting yourself up for wins, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the book is oriented toward doing. And so if the young man is doing, he will quickly see in himself changes that are so substantial he won't recognize himself. And then it becomes obvious, and how you stay motivated, it's not even a question. It's not a question even of a discipline. It's just a question of, like, how do I continue to do what I, as the B of me would do? And I don't know, it's self-reinforcing and positive in that way.
Mm-hmm.
It's real adulting. It's awesome.
I shared this book with someone that I've met through Substack, Susan Harley, who runs a Substack called Courageous Conversations. And she and I had been talking about starting something like a book club, a conversation, a community building activity built around a book or an idea. And so I shared this book with her, and we are going to be launching a book club. We have our first kickoff in the beginning of September, and we're going to be reading through the preparation over 2 months and inviting people to join us to talk about the ideas in it. For Susan, it was an interesting concept. She was familiar with Doug Casey, and she also has a grandson. So there was an immediate link for her in thinking, I'll read this book and then maybe I'll share it with him. But I wanted to ask, for someone like me, I don't have children, I don't have grandchildren, I don't even have many young men in my life. I do have, though, 2 nieces who are just about finishing up school, and they will most likely be headed down a college track, because I imagine that that's what their parents will want for them. So talk a little bit about how someone like me, who would love to see these young women actually pursue an alternative path, how can I have a conversation with their parents to help them see that there is this alternative, but it's one that's not socially accepted. It's one that is going to have its own hiccups along the way, but it's hands-on and it's skills focused, and they would come out of doing something like this very different. What advice do you have for someone like me to have those conversations?
I mean, you could start with the crisis around the university education. I mean, where do you begin? It's something like, if you factor in the opportunity cost of lost wages, even in a dead-end job, the debt that most people end up with in the servicing of that debt over time, and the cost of the tuition and stuff that you actually pay. The median cost of that is $300,000. Now, that is the median net worth of an American household. So that's a crazy idea in and of itself. The typical household is going to basically invest in this thing, in this education, to prepare them for the future, is like a basic cost benefit is worth a shot. Like, you just do the math on it first of all. And then you got to factor in what's coming down the pipe. And I'm not just talking about economic issues, which certainly there will be economic issues, but what about AI? I mean, most of these jobs that people are being prepared for in our highly specialized society so some people's view of AI is that, it's going to be this super grand thing that can do all kinds of crazy, super intelligent stuff. Even if that isn't the case, let's just assume it just allows for automation.
Mhm.
Our specialized jobs that people have today are white collar, especially, are perfectly set up to be automated. Almost across the board, all of those entry level jobs that college grads are hoping for are perfect for automation, because they're so specialized. And so I think that the risks of doing it are so high. Also all the bad ideas they feed you, that it doesn't actually college doesn't teach you to be responsible, really, to take total responsibility for yourself, because you live in this basically like a summer camp that has a lot more free time than a summer camp would, because summer camps are highly scheduled, actually. Where everything's provided for you, and you're basically surrounded by only peers who are not going to be the best influences on you. So I don't know. I would start with just the basic cost benefit of it. Is it worth it? And then the problem is that they'll say then, well, what are the other choices? Join the military, go to follow Mike Rowe what Mike Rowe says, and become a pipe fitter. I mean, I don't know if that's right for my girls, I could see them saying. And I understand that, like, the trades, although I think they're a better, probably more certain economic future if you went into the trades, I think that it feels very unfulfilling for a lot of people to go that direction,
Mhm.
So anyway, I think you have to do a cost benefit analysis with them, and then I think they're going to then say, what are the options, and then you should ask them to read the book.
Yeah.
And then while it's written for boys, it's true, it's written for boys. There's no reason why, and there's some things that might make a girl might not like to read in there, because it's basically talking to a boy in a way that a boy would resonate with. But the specific cycles, the basic idea of how the world actually works
Mhm.
versus how people are told it works, that all applies.
Yeah, it absolutely applies. And as we said, it doesn't just apply to young men, but it applies to all of us at any age. So for the same reason, it can also apply to a young woman. And you've very explicitly said that this is a book written by you, men, for men, in an experience that you've had, that you understand, from a perspective that you understand. And so I think it's good to be explicit about that. There are very few things these days that are specifically written for that target audience. And so that's
No,
fine. And
it's actually, you're not allowed to do it. I mean, I've been chastised already. Oh, well, where's the girl? What about the girls? And I'm like, my daughter is now the same age that Max was when we started. So there'll be something for girls, I think. It just
Mhm.
can't be, it just can't be written by me entirely, because it has to be someone who understands all the fears, anxieties, hopes, and ambitions of a young woman, which are different than a young man.
Right. Right. And that is such an important thing for us to underline in our society, because we've almost wiped that out. That anyone can do anything at all times, and
And
everybody should
everyone
be
wants to do
interested.
the same things,
Exactly.
So it's just like recognizing the reality of how people really feel, and saying, well, like, you have what a young man wants to aspire to, like, will not make sense in some cases to young women. I mean, they'll be like, that's dumb. But for a young man, it's like, that sounds awesome,
Yeah.
you know. And it will be the same exactly in reverse for
Right.
girls. So
Yeah, absolutely agree with you. I think it's really important, actually, for us as a society to focus on the differences in what girls want and what boys want, and that's not a bad thing necessarily. So well done. So, Maxim, maybe just to wrap up, on a motivational note, what would you say to encourage other young people to join you in this curriculum? And it's important, I think, to say that you're not done with the program yet. You're halfway through, but you're still carrying on. And so, what would you say to someone who's maybe interested but hesitant or worried about stepping off a traditional path?
That's a really tough question, actually, because I think this path isn't meant for everyone, and I think that's been demonstrated to some degree with the responses we've got from some some people, just a couple people around my age, where they read the book and then they say, yeah, that's great, but I'm not really going to do anything. And I think that's a demonstration of lack of courage, actually, because it's all there. I mean, if you read the preface and the first 3 paragraphs of everything I've done in 2 years, you can do more than that, especially if you have the structure that I didn't have during a year and a half. You can do more than that. So if you read the book where everything's set up for you, the be do have, the framework, the mental framework, um, the myths that are dispelled about the world and how you can interact with it, and then what you can actually do, if that's not motivating enough, then I don't know if we can be of any help to that. I think it is. I mean, when I read through it again after not reading it for 7 or 8 months, it was motivating to me after already doing it. So I think it's not meant for everybody. I think it's meant for people who already have some level of ambition
It's
and courage.
I think courage is the thing. Yeah, I think you got
More than ambition, I agree.
More than ambition.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's just to take the first step.
Yeah.
You know, it's
Right.
then it compounds. So yeah, if there is a prerequisite, it's you got to have a little courage.
Just get
Yeah.
off zero and get started.
Exactly.
And I think it's important to also point out that reading the book is just the first step. Reading the book is not the preparation. It's the plan to get you onto that. But then you have to go and do the things and read the things and study the things. And so
The hell gets easy if you just accept it.
Yeah.
If you just really I'm looking at my choices. I've got the military, I've got the trades, or I've got college, or I've got this. And if you just choose this one instead, it's just follow the program. Just follow the program, and the momentum will build on itself.
Well, it's wonderful. I thank you both so much for coming on. And I will say that we are hoping, Maxim, that you can join us during the course of our book chat and come in and talk to the people who are reading through the book and who may have questions for you specifically about your experience with it. So we would love to have you back to do that.
Yeah, for sure. That would be great.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both. Before we go, remind people how they can find the book and how they can follow along with all the work that both of you are doing.
The book is on Amazon. That's where you can get it. I encourage people to get the hardback, which is super expensive for a book. It's $99, but it's full color. It's beautiful. I mean, we really went through great effort to make it as beautiful as it could be. Because my thought is, if I was thinking selfishly as a father, if I'm trying to get him to read it, I would want it to show up in his hands and him immediately understand it's not like anything he's ever held before. It's obviously different. So it's definitely more expensive, but that's just, trust me, Amazon gets basically the vast majority of the money from it, no matter what. Mm-hmm. So, but Amazon's where you get it. And, I have what I do with Doug Casey's Take, which is a podcast you can find on YouTube or on the podcast platforms, or Crisis Investing on Substack.
And I just have maximsmith.com, which leads to my Substack page. So I think that's it.
Fantastic. Well, I expect that there are going to be a lot of nice wrapped hardcover copies of this book under Christmas trees this year. I hope that a lot of our viewers will be inspired to read the book for themselves and hand it off to the young people in their lives. And so we just thank you both for what you've done and for coming on and talking about it.
Well, thanks for having us.
Thank you, Zahra.
Yeah, really appreciate it.
Well, thanks again to Matt and Maxim Smith for this insightful discussion. If you're rethinking a traditional path at any age, be sure to check out the preparation. And be sure to join us on Substack over the next 2 months as we engage in a community-focused book chat about this very book. As always, we thank you for tuning into Collapse Life. You can learn more about us at collapselife.com and sign up for a monthly membership while you're there. And if you like what you see, please consider giving us the gift of caffeine at our Buy Me a Coffee page. The jolt is much appreciated. We look forward to seeing you here again next week. Until then, keep your chin up. It's only collapse. See you soon.